evening. May I have a motion, please, to return the regular board meeting to public session? Mr. Borenstein, thank you. Mr. Mecca, second. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. I call the regular board meeting to order. All board members are present via Zoom. In accordance with Executive Order 202.1, please be advised that members of the public will not be permitted to attend the board meeting in person. This meeting is being conducted as a webinar. The public has had the option to register for this meeting. Dr. McCleary, at this time, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion, please, A, up after item 3, and approve the rest of the agenda as presented? Mrs. Van Zeist, thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Item 3 is recognition. Dr. McKenna, I now turn it over to you for district recognition.
Okay, thank you very much. Today we are very happy to recognize our school-related professionals day, and very happy to recognize today the presidents of our school-related professionals units. And this is a day to honor the work of the people who support students, teachers, and the care of school buildings. So our presidents are the CSEA, which is our Civil Service Employees Associations, represent our custodial and nutrition and maintenance as Mr. Andy Davey. He's the president of that unit. Our CST, which are our Computer Support Technician Association. We'd like to recognize Cheryl Wood and Linda Shelton, co-presidents of that organization. They do a great job. Our WARP, which is our Woodsville Association of Educational Related Personnel. Karen Baker represents them, and she is an excellent representative for her group. And the WISTA, which is the Williams Supervisors and Computer Technician Associates, are Christine Harding and Lou Solomon. They're co-presidents of that group, and thank you for all that you do. Got a chance to meet with all of them today earlier in a Zoom call as well, and I can tell you they are hard work for all of their people in their units. And we thank you for not just everything you do for everyone in your units, but these are folks that work tirelessly. These are a lot of folks behind the scenes that keep our buildings clean. They do so much in our offices and so much to make schools run. And I just wanted to say we appreciate you and all that you do. So thank you very much to School-Related Professionals. And that's School-Related Professionals Day is Tuesday, November 17th. So that's for you. And the next one we wanted to say too is we want to recognize, we had a very special recognition tonight for Judy Katz. This evening, we'd like to recognize Mrs. Judy Katz, who's been dedicated force in public education, serving as president of the Williamsville School Board, the BOCES Board, and New York State School Board Association. She was recently honored by the state with the Everett R. Dyer Award, New York's highest honor for school board service. This is a really big award. We're very proud of Judy. We wanted to highlight Judy's passion and dedication to the district and honor her with a short video presentation. So please make sure you watch this. And Judy, we're very proud of you.
For more than 50 years, Judy Katz has dedicated herself to public education. And in October, she was honored by the New York State School Board Association with the Everett R. Dyer Award for Distinguished School Board Service. It's New York's most prestigious honor, recognizing former school board members for outstanding contributions to public education and children in their district.
I was really, really shocked and touched because there are 700 chosen is quite an honor.
She's dedicated her whole life to public education and students. And she's done it with respect and positivity and enthusiasm over a lifetime. It's extraordinary, and she is exceptional.
Judy's service to Williamsville began in the 1970s, first as the president of the Maple West PTA, before running and being elected to the school board in 1974. She would stay on the board for 15 years and even served as president from 1982 to 1984, an instrumental voice in overseeing change throughout the district.
So working with the most fabulous school board members, meeting them, getting to know them better. I served with wonderful board members in Williamsville.
Judy's passion for public education is infectious, her enthusiasm never wavering in her 5 decades serving on the Williamsville School Board, BOCES Board, and on NISBA.
I really think that I've been placed on this earth, or we've all been placed on this earth, to make a difference in the lives of others. And that's how I feel.
You know, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know anyone. There may be others, but I just don't know anyone in my world who is that dedicated. She's exceptional, and she sparks others to become exceptional.
And her message to those who want to get involved?
You'll affect the lives of so many students. And if you're really pro public education and care about the students who we deliver the education to, there's no better service you can do.
Judy, congratulations and thank you for your so many contributions to our district. We are truly appreciative of everything that you have done to help our students, our entire community. So thank you so much, and congratulations again for that amazing award. Next, we would like to recognize Dodge Elementary's Miss Melody Martin. Miss Martin has demonstrated an ability to think on her feet, be creative, and engaging with students and staff to help provide a unique educational experience for her school community. At this time, we'd like to play a video highlighting the contributions of Miss Martin. And I think you'll find this really interesting.
In the past, for Halloween, we would do a parade, but we needed a safe and socially distanced way to celebrate with the students that are here. Part of that was asking Melody to do a short song, and what she produced completely surpassed our expectations.
My dad really got me into music. He started teaching me how to play guitar when I was 8 years old, and I've been playing guitar ever since. He wrote songs too, so he got me into songwriting from a really young age. Writing children's songs I've learned is really fun. I really enjoy that.
Not only does she serve as an educational aid, but it's important too to show kids that we have interests and we have passions outside of here. And as leaders, we should find ways in which that can enhance the learning environment.
I love working with kids. I've been working with kids for a long time. I coach sports. Dodge is amazing. Like, I love being here. Everyone is so energetic and so happy. It makes learning that much more enjoyable. It brightens my day. I love every second of it.
These are the type of people that work here. People that care deeply about students, but also find ways to bring joy and happiness into this space. And I think we did just that with Ms. Martin.
Well, Melody, thank you so much for sharing your talent and your creativity with us. We really appreciate it. I know all the students at Dodge, the staff, and the whole Dodge community absolutely loved it. It was so motivational, and thank you. It's really appreciated and really helped the whole school community there have a great time at Halloween. So thank you, and thank all the staff for sharing all their creativity and talents with our student staff. So congratulations. Our spotlight this month is Dodge Elementary and Melody Martin. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna, and thank you, Mr. Filipowski, for your help on those presentations. They were fantastic. For Veterans Day, I'd like to say that on behalf of the Williamsville Board of Education, I would like to recognize all the men and women of the Williamsville community who have served our country as members of the United States military, both past and present. I would also like to recognize the spouses, parents, and children of our military members and thank them for their sacrifices. Thank you for your service to our country. At this time, are there any other board acknowledgements? Mr. Viscalia?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge some of the Williamsville sports teams. In this year, we were lucky enough, many districts in Western New York to have sports. So I just wanted to recognize the Williamsville East boys, the Williamsville North boys, and the Williamsville East girls soccer teams. They all won their ECI division titles and are on to section playoffs, all in pretty good seeds to accomplish some great goals for those soccer teams. So I just wanted to congratulate them on a good season, on a difficult season considering everything that was going on. So, hats off to those three Williamsville sports teams. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Viscalia. Anybody else from the board? Okay, seeing none. At this time, we're going to move to the community update. We're reordering our agenda a little bit in order to give our community and our parents online an opportunity to hear from Dr. McKenna and to get an update on where we are with our COVID situation and being in our yellow zone. So at this time, Dr. McKenna, would you like to please give your community update?
Yes, first we got a couple of presentations. I want to briefly go through just the Reset, Relaunch, Return Committee, because at the last board meeting, I know I said bring everybody up to speed because now the plan is has been phased in. So I'll briefly go through that, and then I want to go through the yellow, orange, and red microclust strategy presentation that we put together for you. I hope it answers a lot of the questions. We've been receiving a lot of questions today because yesterday we were put into a yellow zone, not only Williamsville, but basically our whole county. So there's been a lot of questions. So we tried to put a presentation together that we hope will answer many of your questions. But if we have not, please give us your questions. And if we don't have the answer, we'll find the answer for you as soon as we possibly can. So the first thing, though, I want to go over is the Reset, Relaunch, Return presentation. So Nick, if you could put that up, I will go through that because we're very proud of all the work that went into this. Our students, staff, parents, administration, community really did a great job of making sure we were able to phase in relaunch plan. So we want to go through that real quick and thank folks along the way because this was a heavy lift that took a lot of people working, and I thank everybody for their teamwork and their dedication. Much appreciated. So the next one right there, this was the timeline. If you remember when we put that in, we said we were going to do a phase-in model. We put in grades 5 and 6 on October 13th, and we did that. October 9th, we did grades 7 and 8. And then October 26th, recently, we got grades 9 through 12 in, and we've been able to, visit all the schools, see the classrooms, talk to teachers, talk to students. Today, I got a chance to talk to the SciEx students too. We got a lot of great feedback from them with what's going well, ways we can improve. So we're very happy with the way it was phased in, and we're still open to ideas, for improvement. But to make that phase-in plan work really took a lot of effort from a lot of people. So again, thanks to everybody who made that work. Next slide there, Nick. What we had to do to make this happen was really we started with 4 committees. And those 4 committees, they're still running, they're still working. Of course, the Reset, Relaunch, Return Committee is the one that was the architect of the plan. What we did was we researched best practices. We consulted with other districts, 5 other districts to be exact. We talked to their teachers, their administrators. We saw lessons from them. So we got really good information from other districts. We also got some great resources from Erie One BOCES, and they helped us with our training as well. And the University at Buffalo. We had some great, as I say, information from them and research that they shared. And we're still working with them as well as we continue through this process and into the future. We developed an instructional model to deliver a Williamsville education for our middle school and high school students, and it is happening today. So next slide, Nick. What we did to relaunch, we developed a phase-in plan with the middle and high schools. We developed professional learning opportunities to prepare and support our staff. We did a lot of professional learning, and Dr. Ben, I know, is here tonight too. And I want to thank her and her team for putting so many offerings together for our staff. They did some required training, but then they did so much more. So thank you and your team, because there is really an enormous amount of ongoing support for our staff. And I thank all the staff too, because they're helping right now and putting support together for each other. We also ensured we had proper technology and equipment and support, and that was a heavy lift. And that's where I got to give a lot of thanks to Matursky and his team. I say over 2,300 laptops, over 2,400 Chromebooks, and all the hotspots we put in, all the new document cameras we made sure that we had for all the classrooms, and the integrators, the tech facilitators, and the CTs. We tried to put a tech team in each building to give support to our staff, because that was one of the things through the process we knew they did. We gave additional G Suite training as well, and we did multiple testing on a weekly basis to make sure that we had the bandwidth and that everything was working. So a lot of people had to help to make that work. Next slide, Nick. And then the return portion of our plan. The phase-in model is complete, but we have ongoing professional development. We're utilizing Wednesdays very well. Dr. Balin has put together a professional catalog of ideas so that our staff can continue to get support. And ongoing committee work. The committees are continuing work. Just because we've got the model phased in, we're far from over with the work that we're doing with these cases. So the work continues. We have additional supportive workshops from Erie One BOCES, many new workshops that they helped work with our folks, and the folks came together with a lot of new workshops to help and support our teachers. And we put together our own catalog of professional opportunities. Dr. Balin, along with Mr. Ferentz, put together these collaborative dialogue sessions that staff is getting together, and they're sharing best practices with each other and getting great feedback from that. And Dr. Balin is putting together a library of digital resources for ongoing support into the future for our staff as well. We also put together, extensive communication. We transitioned to our weekly newsletter. All 15 schools and our district office now are having a weekly newsletter that's giving hopefully updates on all the information along the way, and keeping constant ongoing communication between all our schools. And we want to put together a consistent communication format throughout the whole district. So we now have done that, and I hope that you're seeing that they're sharing a lot of communication with everybody. That's one of the things that we heard from a lot of the groups that we've met with. They said, can you keep communication going on a regular basis? We said, absolutely. And that's why we came up and we made sure we did a consistent process through all the schools. The daily update, we did 31 total. We're done with the daily updates, with the weekly updates and the daily updates. I thank the PTA. They asked if through that process I would do daily updates, and we made sure that we kept everybody informed each day throughout the relaunch process. Next slide. The Williamsville relaunch plan with extensive communication. If you have any questions regarding the relaunch plan, what we put together on our website, please go to the website, because we put together a lot of resources, and Mr. Filipowski put a whole, a couple of pages of information. So if you still have questions about the relaunch plan, please go to the website, because you'll see videos, you see the FAQs we put together, and we get the frequently asked questions. We went to so many different forums, we heard so many different questions that were asked, so we tried to summarize really the main questions that we kept getting over and over. So please go if you have questions and look at the website first, because probably the questions you have will be answered there. Also, contact your teacher. If there's things that are happening in your classroom right now they still have some questions about, we ask you to please contact teacher directly, and your building principal if there's building issues that are going on, because in talking to teachers and the building principals, they want you to contact them if there's any problems or issues. So make sure that you keep in contact with them if there's any problems along the way, and I know that they're happy to help and support our students and our community through this process. So, next slide. And the work doesn't stop. You know, I told you the committees are continuing to work. We're continuing to review what we're doing and how we're doing it. I met with the SciAC students today, and the whole point of today was with the students, give us feedback from your perspective as students. And they were great. And, you know, we listened to them. We took lots of notes. We're going to be meeting with the committees again, too, next week, getting feedback from them. And we're constantly going to be getting feedback from our parents as well. And I say we're open to finding, honing, and making sure that we keep working it, you know, every day to make sure any way we can make model better, we're open to it. So that's that for that. And then I know we have one more slide here, and I think the next slide is actually we wanted to show you a video presentation of the HighFlex model in action. We got a chance to visit a lot of classrooms and see a lot of good things going on. We thought that this presentation might be beneficial to you as you can see the model in action.
Sure, remote and hybrid students have the same access to a Williamsville education. While each teacher's setup and delivery might be different, it is incredible to see the ingenuity, creativity, and lengths our teachers are going through to deliver instruction. Even though the learning environment might change, whether remote or in person, our teachers have showcased their talent and dedication to delivering a high-quality Williamsville education.
All right, people at home, go ahead and unmute yourself. Let's try to say it together. 1, 2, 3.
Very satisfying. As a teacher who was a little unsure, even as much as a week ago, how's this all going to work? Has anybody ever done this before? But by the second or third day, using this setup that I kind of pieced together here, it ended up working out pretty smoothly. So I feel like all of us still have a lot to learn, but it's a pretty satisfying feeling going home saying like that was a better day than I thought it would be. Unmute yourself and tell us what you're putting, why you put it. Okay, thumbs up, we can see it. What are we looking at with your picture and why'd you pick it?
I did Democrat versus Republican because they're kind of like it's opposite of each other almost. And it's kind of relevant right now.
I wasn't so much worried about, you know, the pressure I was putting on myself. I was worried, are the kids at home still going to feel like they're a part of the lesson? And seeing them be able to actually come back into the classroom and then go home and then come back in, kind of that alternating feeling, again, was something that I felt like was not really possible a week ago or so. And then knowing that it could still work, I did feel a sense of like, okay, I still got this.
They're going to take all of that and multiply by the sine of 38 degrees, or whatever 15 Newton's sine of 38 degrees is, and then the y is going to be that cosine of 38 degrees.
The physics, I think, is real important to see what's going on. So I kind of wanted the cameras to actually be able to capture the class. You know, you hit things with hammers.
1, 2, 3. What's so bad?
I needed the physical space. I like to stand, and I actually put energy in it, and I try to be animated. Just to bring some energy to what I'm doing. So the kids, you know, aren't suffering too much. So that's the approach I've taken. The real struggle I'm having that I got to continue to work through is how do I get the feedback? The kids remotely are having the same issues as the kids in class are. So now I'm kind of indirectly getting feedback about the kids at home too.
I think Wednesdays are very important because many of the teachers are getting additional education during that time and then applying it directly to how to interact with the students remotely. I posted some grades on Tuesday and some students had some questions. So no lie, I had close to 100 different student emails to reply to on Wednesday. One student, she's fully remote, she sent me 11 out of those 100 with smells. And of course, I'm replying in order, so when I start to see like the 5th or 6th one, I call her and say, hey, what's going on? And I spent about 25 minutes with her on the phone, on Zoom at the same time, speaking with her, sharing my screen, and getting her caught up. I think that time provides us the ability to connect with students remotely and learn how to all in the same day.
And I think one of the biggest values of Wednesdays is one, I can get caught up on the grading, because I'm getting overwhelmed for sure. And just being able to collaborate, walk around, talk to that teacher, collaborate, get ideas. Because I'll come up with ideas like, how about I try this? Does this sound insane? You know, because often you just don't know. You know, it seemed like a good idea last night. What do you think? Because during the day, I have no time. I have no time to breathe. Right? It's just valuable.
We understand that each family's experience, whether receiving remote or in-person instruction, will vary. While we understand the desire to return to a sense of normalcy, we want to acknowledge the many contributions of families as partners in the educational process. We are fortunate that families wanted to share their experiences in the HighFlex model thus far. We will continue to work collaboratively with stakeholders to ensure student success and well-being.
It's been enjoyable to see them kind of go to school here because they pop out and kind of share more details about their day than we might normally get. You know, by the end of the day, they wouldn't think of the small things like that. You have to be a little more on top of finding, making sure that everything's done, or just constantly making sure that you haven't missed something, and then making sure it actually got submitted. Not just done, but turned in electronically.
You're constantly on a screen. Like, a lot of kids are getting much more screen time than they usually get, especially with the fact that a lot of our homework is on digital as well.
I thought it would be a big learning curve, especially like going online, because so for me personally, I was able to be productive things go in and out, and I think that was kind of big. I believe that I was able to do it. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. So with the teachers having to, like, I guess, handle 3 different classes at once in a way, I thought it was going to be like, I don't want to say distraction, but a little bit of a distraction with having to deal with the 2 different classes. So, but it hasn't really been a problem. We're going to keep it on different ways to incorporate both at once.
I have some friends that are all digital. I think it's nice for them to have other students on Zoom, those like Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday. I think that works really well to have other peers that are usually in school. I'm listening with them, so it's not really like isolating those students like, apart from the HighFlex students. I think that's worked really well.
When the hybrid model first started, I was a little concerned that maybe the virtual kids wouldn't be getting as much like attention as hybrid kids, but it's been really good so far. They've been balanced really nicely. Hybrid kids in school can hear us ask questions and hear the answer to them. We can hear them, and so usually a little more difficult since they don't have the headset like the teachers. But we get to interact with them through, like we mentioned earlier, breakout rooms. We get to talk to other students through those.
I'm full remote, and I like it a lot when the teachers specify who they're asking a question to, because if they're asking it to people in class and people at home, I'm not sure if I should unmute or if I should raise my hand, but then if I raise my hand, they might not see me. So I have a great Social teacher, and he always, like, will go back and forth and goes, okay, and this one's for the homies, you know, homies. And then he'll go back to the hybrid kids, and we'll do it like that, or he'll just say, okay, and everyone, you can unmic, you can just shout out the answer. So I like when he like specifies like who he's talking to.
After last year, we worried about it, but we figured out when everything that people were telling us that it was going to be better. They proved it to me, and I really do like the way the HighFlex model works. I'm very happy for all the kids who are able to go back into school, were able to go back into school.
We've just been very thankful and impressed by the teachers, the principals, the schools, everyone involved in it, because I got to imagine this has been an insane amount of work on their end too. And I know we've been stressed about it on every change and everything. And then I think at this point we're just relieved and thankful that things are going the way they're going, because I really don't feel like these guys have taken any sort of step back educationally.
As we move forward, we will continue to evaluate and make any necessary adjustments to the HighFlex model. If you have any questions, as always, please contact your teachers and building principals.
Well, I want to thank everybody who put that presentation together. You can see it's an enormous amount of teamwork. Our students have been fantastic. Our parents have been so cooperative and helpful. Our teachers have gone above the call of duty to make things work for hybrid and remote students. The administration has just worked tirelessly to make sure that we got everything all set for the Relaunch Plan. So I got to thank everybody. It was a lot of work, and again, we're going to keep up the work. We're not stopping, but thanks to everybody to making that come to fruition. And another big thanks to the SIAC kids again for meeting with us today and all their great ideas that they shared. It's only going to help make us better. So thank you all. The next presentation that we want to do, I'll have Nick cue this up, is the yellow, orange, and red microcluster strategy. We put this together because, as you know, yesterday we were put into a yellow zone. So we've been working very hard with Erie County Department of Health. We've been working with our local districts. We've all been working together through this process. And we'd like to share some information with you right now about, where we are, and hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you might have at this point in time. And if we can't answer your questions right now, we will get the answers for you because we are working this problem every day. So I asked Christine Harding to help this presentation today. Christine is our nurse practitioner, and she has been working with Erie County Department of Health literally every single day, 7 days a week. And she has an enormous amount of information, and she's really been a great resource to our district as we've been putting our plan together, and as we continue, I know the rest of the week, continuing to put our plan together and everything moving forward to make sure that we are fully prepared to implement yellow zone strategies. So next slide, Nick. So Erie County is put in a yellow zone COVID-19 microcluster. What is the criteria for a yellow zone? Well, I think you heard this too on some of the television stations. It's been pretty much on all the news, but in case you missed some, it's a 7-day rolling average positivity above 2.5% for 10 days, and the geographic area has 10 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day rolling average. So basically a 7 rolling average of above 2.5%, and you're in a yellow zone. Now we're actually far above that right now. So these are the numbers that I think we're very concerned to our governor and why we're put in this zone. Our current number today was 5.5% for a 7-day rolling average as of November 10th. Our daily positivity infection rate is 7.1% as of today. So actually, if you look at those numbers, you would say that that's not yellow. As we go forward, you might even say that those are red numbers. Well, we could end up being in a different color if these numbers don't change. If the trajectory continues, we could end up not just being in yellow, but maybe in an orange or red zone. This is an opportunity for the region to get the numbers under control and prepare. That's what our county executive has said in his announcements, that right now that we've all been put in a yellow zone to basically review our practices, look at what we're doing, and start to make changes so that we can change these numbers. And I can tell you that we're doing everything we can. And from talking to all the superintendents in the region, all of the school districts right now are going to be doing everything in their power to take this opportunity to do everything in our power, to get these numbers to be going in a different trajectory. Next slide. So a microcluster strategy, again, for the yellow zone, the 7-day rolling average of positivity, we talked about that. Schools can remain open in a yellow zone. That's one of the things that I want to make clear. We must do random testing of 20% of our in-person students and staff at least once a week. And that was one of the questions that came up. Is it remote and in-person students? And the answer for that question is it's 20% of the in-person students and the teachers and all staff. So it's the entire staff of the school. We established a system in WITS already for randomizing the testing. Some people have asked the question already, how are you going to randomize if it's supposed to be random 20% who get tested? Well, we've already put together a system. We're using WITS, and what we're going to do is it's purely random. We have it programmed so that different people would randomly come up each time we do it. Consent forms will be sent to selected. Today, what we did, if you notice, we sent a form out to see about who would, we want to make sure everybody would be willing to put in consent forms, because there is an opportunity, folks, if they don't want to consent to testing, they don't have to. So we tried to get some information out day two about the type of test. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. The test that we'll be using, or what the state has told us they're sending us, is the BINAX test, which is not the big intrusive test. It's where they just do a little swab and they put it on a card. But we'll be talking about that as we go on in the presentation. Next slide. And now turn it over to Christine. I'm going to have her talk about the orange and red zones. I know that she was on a special webinar the other day to talk specifically about this. So Christine, I want you to explain to us what would happen if we did an orange zone or red zone.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me join. The orange zone gets a little more complicated once we hit orange or red, should we hit that. And so what it looks at is really a 7-day rolling average positivity above 3% for 10 days, and the geographic area has 10 or more newly daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day rolling average. And what will happen with the orange zone, should that be designated, schools need to temporarily pivot to fully remote instruction for a 2-week period. So that is a mandatory pivot to those 2 weeks. In order for schools to be able to reopen, all students, faculty, staff who would be attending any on-site instruction or teaching would need to have a negative COVID test in order to reopen. From there, once you are reopened and it's starting 7 days after reopening, then there has to be 25% of your in-person population would have to be tested weekly. And again, we would have that system that Dr. McKenna mentioned in WICS to be able to pull our sample from, and the consent forms that Dr. McKenna mentioned. And the other thing that has to occur in this orange zone would be a line list report, it's called, to the DOH, New York State Department of Health, with all of our information on how many people we tested and what those test results are. So in addition to our daily reporting that I think everyone is aware of, that's required for New York State, this would be an additional report and component that's required in the orange zone. Next slide, please. For red zone, pretty much everything stays the same. The difference here is the 7-day rolling average positivity above 4% for 10 days is when you hit that red zone. And again, it would be that temporary pivot to the full remote for the 2 weeks, and the 25% of your in-person students, teachers, staff would need to be tested. So that part stays the same during that red zone. Next slide, please.
Have to unmute there. Now I'd like to talk about some of the communication that we've been having this week and will continue to have. We're going to continue to have conversations with the Erie County Department of Health. We speak to them on a daily basis. We got the guidelines from them as we're putting our plan together. We run basically everything through them to make sure that the things that we're doing meet their guidelines. We have continued to have conversations with medical partners in our community. One of the folks that we're having conversations with is outside testing organizations, because if we're going to be doing testing, you'll see in a few slides, there's a lot of tests that Williamsville would have to do. If our whole district is in a yellow zone, that's almost 800 tests a week, 20% comes out to. So that's a lot of tests. So for us to get the capacity to do that, we need to look outside medical partners. So that's what we've been doing, yesterday and today, is we've been having conversations with outside medical partners to see how we can partner with them to do testing. The Erie County Department of Health was going to, at first, was going to help districts with that, but because of the sheer volume now across, Western New York, they no longer have the capacity to be able to really come in and help school districts, because you can tell if just Williamsville alone needs, almost 1,800 tests, probably across our region, there's probably a need for probably over 10,000 tests at this particular time. So the districts in general across the region are grappling with the same problem, and that's the testing capacity. So I know Williamsville, as well as other districts, are in conversations with outside medical partners to see if there's ways that we can partner to get the capacity for testing. We also have continued, we had conversations with the town of Amherst to look at maybe some facilities outside of our school, perhaps to, if we had to do, use any testing sites outside of our school. So we've had some conversations there. And continue to have conversations with the area superintendents. The superintendents are basically been talking on a daily basis since probably last Thursday. And we continue to talk on a daily basis to share ideas with each other and help each other out. I can say the whole region really is working together to help to solve this problem. And I say thanks to all my fellow superintendents out there who are working hard and have been so cooperative, and everyone's been sharing just lots of ideas. It's definitely the same problems, issues are in every district. Next slide. Just on the communication we've already sent out. I know we sent a letter out to families and staff on November 6th. Really, that was last Friday, just to get people accumulate, like to start to get the idea of what the yellow, orange, red zone is all about and the metrics for that. We sent a letter to families and staff on November 9th regarding yellow zone designation. We did that because we've been trying to get information out as we get information. And today we sent the survey to faculty and staff and families for their willingness to participate in the random testing. And you'll see many of the districts are getting that out as well. That's part of a checklist that we got from Erie County Department of Health, was that they suggest we survey our faculty and staff to see the willingness to participate in the testing. So that's why that survey went out today. Some people were asking about that as well, as why we surveying. It's actually part of a plan that was sent to us and to all the districts around the region. So that's why you'll see many of the districts have started this process of surveying their faculty and staff and families about the willingness to send. Next slide. We also, to help with communication, we created an informational page on the district's website regarding the yellow, orange, and red zone information. So if you have questions, I know Mr. Filipowski is taking all of the most recent correspondences from Erie County Department of Health, New York Department of Health. We're putting them all on our own website. So I would suggest too, with questions that you might have about yellow, orange, and red zone, there's some really good documents there to read through. So I would tell everybody to reach out to that informational page that we now have on our website. And thank you, Nick, for putting that up today so that our parents can use that and access that as a resource. And next page, I'm going to turn it over to Christine now, and she's going to talk a little bit about the zip codes and the actual amount of weekly tests that we would need for each zip code. Christine.
Thanks. So what we did in preparation, we really broke down our buildings, where they reside, what zip codes they reside in, because that is how the testing can occur. We were actually, I think everybody was quite surprised with the governor announcing all of Erie County was in the yellow zone. We kind of anticipated a little more dissection and looking at really zip codes and problematic zip codes. So in preparation, we really took a look at where our buildings reside and try to get a good understanding of what the amount of weekly tests would look like. So in the 14051 zip code, we have Dodge, Casey Transit, and Williamsville East. And really 20%, that would be 533 weekly tests. So that's in that yellow zone. If that hit the orange, red zone, if the zip code should fall into that designation, you're looking at about 667 weekly tests to meet that 25% testing criteria. Next slide, please. 14221 zip code, it has 9 buildings residing in that zip code. So this is going to be obviously an increase, quite an increase in our testing. 20% is 1,204 weekly tests, and 25% would be 1,594 tests should be hit that orange or that red zone criteria. And again, this is really looking at your on-site population. This is not, it does not include the need to test for any remote learner. This is really just our on-site population numbers. And we did all these projections, again, in anticipation for what testing would look like and what kind of capacity we were looking at. So next slide, please. So Dr. McKenna mentioned we are anticipating what will happen. What we're told is happening is that New York State Department of Health will really send these Binax Now tests. It's an antigen test to Erie County Department of Health, and from there it would be distributed to be able to support the needs for the volume of testing that would be required. At this point in time, those tests have not been deployed yet, and there's really no definitive timeline as to when these tests would come, and that's really when we are in that yellow zone, but the clock really starts ticking as soon as those tests arrive in terms of the timeline that we have to conduct the weekly test. So the Binax Now test, we will get more information out. There's some videos just so parents, students, our staff can kind of take a look at what it is, but it's really a non-invasive nasal swab. It's not that nasopharyngeal swab that goes all the way up the nostril. This is really just more of a Q-tip and a localized swab inside the nasal cavity. Results are rapid, 15 minutes, the test will be there. And so it's really, it's called a credit card style test, and it's been compared to something like a home pregnancy test in terms of the results and what it all looks like and how rapid it is. So we will get some video information out there for everyone, just so you can kind of take a closer look, and hopefully an educational pamphlet as well. So there are some testing sites that the district has identified. Maple East, Williamsville North, Williamsville South, that's what we're hoping for and projecting in terms of our sites within the district. And as Dr. McKenna mentioned, you know, we did work with Amherst to also look at potentially, you know, a site within the town as well. So these are different options that we're exploring at this point in time. The other thing I just wanted to point out, all the information that we share, I just think it's really important, especially for the community, to understand that in terms of, although we're seeing an increase in numbers out in the community, and certainly with the daily updates that Dr. McKenna provides with our cases, we are seeing and feeling the effects of the increase in the infection rate in the community. But in terms of schools, we are not seeing that in-school transmission of COVID. And so really what that tells us and the Erie County Department of Health is all of the mitigating practices that are in play for schools to be able to operate, starting with our health screening questionnaire, staying home if you're sick, wearing your face covering, social distancing. All of those mitigating practices are really effective when you aren't seeing that in-school transmission. It's really what's happening outside of the school day that is really impacting numbers and the increase. So I just want to point that out because it's a very important takeaway, is just to really stay focused on the positives with regard to these practices, and that taking something away in terms of these are effective. And I think we just have to really stay mindful of that piece. Next slide, please. Turn it back over to Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, I'll just go over a brief summary of just some of the things we're going to continue to work on. Of course, we're going to continue our daily consultation with the Erie County Department of Health. They've been, you know, really great partners through the process. They give us incredibly good information to help us with our plan and our strategies, and I thank them. We've had multiple informational meetings with our building principals already. We've told the principals to be ready. If we have to go to an orange zone or a red zone, one of the questions that's come up too is, what if we have to transition to you know, into red or orange? You can see what Christine had said before. That means that, you know, you have to go to remote for at least 2 weeks. Well, with the middle school, high school, we've already got that. We've already been through that. So we can transition pretty easily with the middle schools and high schools. With elementary schools, we did talk with the principals, and I know that they've had conversations with their staff to make sure that their staff is preparing to, just in case there's any time that they have to make a transition. And I know that they've already done that. And I know some of the parents that we spoke to have already mentioned that, you know, their children have brought things home, you know what I mean, in preparation. And not, we don't know when, you know, if and when, but we're be prepared. So we've had many conversations with our principals if we have to make transitions to, you know, orange or red. And I'm glad to see that they have had the conversations with their staff, and we are pairing as we speak to make any transitions that we need to. Informational meetings with the union leaders. I met with the union leaders today of all our 7 bargaining units, because these things impact everybody. So I wanted to, and they gave me some really great feedback today. And in fact, some of the questions that they, gave me today with the leadership team, we're going to be exploring, tomorrow and the next day, because how does these things affect all their membership? Great question. So we're going to have more meetings with the union leaders as we go through. Establish a system of random selection for weekly testing. Yep, we've got that done. That was one of the things on the checklist that they said, make sure you get that done. And again, we're using WITS to make sure that we have a very fair random selection process. We've identified our testing sites. That's one of the things ECDOH told us to do. System for notification, we created that. The system for consent forms, we've created that. Continue to provide updates and information as things become available. You can see we've already sent out, at least 2 informational correspondences to you. And as you get correspondence to us, we will get that out to you. As soon as we get the information, we will get out to you, to the community, as soon as we possibly can. So we literally are on the phone every day with the Department of Health, and we're working with our principals, and we're making sure that we are prepared for whatever step it is that we need to take. Next slide. And this is just a summary. I know that the COVID-19 update to families, we were doing it every day. And if you remember, we were, every time we had a new case, we were sending it out, on text messages. We got the feedback, and we stopped that practice because we started to get too many. So we went to, we're transitioning to a daily COVID-19 health report. So one daily notification, through WITS mail, with a list of positive cases in the district. And of course, it's posted on the report card as well. So we thought that was better, since the cases were, were starting to increase. And we felt that, giving people, texts every so many minutes and things like that was, not the best way to, to inform people. So a daily, one daily notification through WITS mail. We made the transition. Again, we heard the voices of people too. A lot of parents communicated to us and asked if we would please do that. So we listened, and we made sure that we made that adjustment. And but we're dedicated every day to making sure that we get you the information. We communicate with you as soon as we have the information, and every day, as soon as we get the information, we will get it out to you. And we wanted you to see that we have our basic plan in place. All the things that are within our control right now, we're in control. But there's things that are outside of our control, and that really is the capacity to test right now. With having to do at the moment, 1,800 or approximately 1,800 tests in a week, that's a big task. We're working that task. We're going to keep reaching out to our partners, and we're trying to find ways to make that happen. So that's what we're working on right now, and we're going to work tirelessly through this process. So I think that's it for this. So next slide. I think we're done. So I hope that answered a lot of questions that you might have. But of course, we're open to any questions that you might have along the way. And again, if we have the answer, we'll get it to you. If we don't have it, we'll find it. And some of the questions right now, there are some things that are in limbo, at the moment. I think one of the big questions that's in limbo is consent. We've heard that today too, about what if people refuse consent. Well, we heard a couple of different things. So we want to make sure we're supposed to be getting guidance on that by the end of the week. I know the county executive today, said that if you refuse consent, that you can't come in school. So, but they're checking on that guidance. I know that the superintendents across the region have asked for clarification. So, and they said they're going to get us clarification. So that's a question that we heard today that's still, there's not a definitive answer at this particular moment. But clarification will be coming soon. And as soon as we get the clarification, we'll make sure that you have the clarification. So again, I hope that our presentation answered a lot of your questions. We're happy to, take your questions and help find answers for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna, and thank you, Ms. Harding, for all that information. There were a number of parents who did submit questions today to our district clerk, who forwarded them to us. A number of them were answered, but there's a couple that I just want to check on. So I understand the test would be a Binax nasal swab, and the results would come in 15 minutes. And you shared the testing locations at the 3 schools. Would this also be a requirement for our pre-K students?
No, Christine, I believe it's not for pre-K students or for students in parochial schools.
So it's if we were to have pre-K within our district buildings, then we would have to test them. But each site that is operating, just like they needed a reopening plan, they would have to come up with the testing plan as well, just like we're having to do within our district for any of the non-public schools.
Right. Yeah, that's a good clarifier.
Yes, thank you. So it's for students who are attending within our schools, but would our private school students have access to come to our 3 sites for testing if they wanted to?
Christine, I'll have you answer that.
Yeah. Okay, it's my understanding that each building, as part of their plan to not only reopen, how they came up with their own individual plan, but in order to comply with the yellow zone criteria and the red orange zone criteria, because again, it's where that building also resides zip code wise, but they would need their own testing plan with regard to how they would comply, because they would also be responsible for doing the things we would need to do, which is to report out the actual information with respect to our on-site population and test results of our on-site population. So they'd have an obligation to do the same thing and test 20% in the yellow zone of their on-site population that we're having to do in our school buildings as well.
Okay, thank you. And the one part, and I apologize if I missed it, when would this testing start?
Well, I think that's the question. I know that we were asking as superintendents, and I know that in the other parts of the state where that happened, it took some time to get the tests from the state to the districts. So I guess the testing would start once the tests were able to be delivered to the districts. Now, from what I understand in the other parts of the state, when that happened, that took over a week to get there. So when we would get those tests, not exactly sure. But once the Erie County Department of Health received them from the state, and then we're able to distribute them to us, that's when we would start. So my guess is we have a little bit of time if it goes what the other, I think, what did they say? In the last, we actually had a specific with one of the districts. They were identified on October 9th, and they got the tests on October 26th. I can't remember the district that they said that there was, but I know when we researched. Yeah. So we know that in that district, it took that long to get the tests. I don't know if it'll take that long for us, because we asked that specific question, and the answer that we got is once the tests arrive, that's when we have to start giving them. So whether it would take that 1 or 2 weeks, we're not sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to let the rest of the board ask questions. I just want to make a quick comment and say that, first of all, I appreciate the frequency of the communication. I know for some it was a little bit redundant the other day when my phone was going off every couple of minutes with a new case. So I appreciate the move to have a daily report. I do think that that's important. And all of the information that is being communicated both on the district website, in tonight's presentation, and through the correspondence that you and I have had, Dr. McKenna, it's been very helpful. I'll make sure that all of the questions that parents are submitting, they're coming through to our district clerk. I'll make sure that they go to Mr. Filipowski so they can perhaps become part of a question and answer document that we can get added to our site. A number of those questions were answered in the presentation tonight, and the ones that seem to be outstanding are ones that I know you're continuing to follow up on. So for me as a parent, that gives me an extreme amount of confidence. I have one in college, and her school is going remote beginning tomorrow. She's a CA, so she has to stay on campus as an essential personnel. But it's stressful as a parent. So having the communication and knowing that the collaboration is taking place with you and with our representatives at the Department of Health, with Dr. Burstein and Christine, all the work that you're doing, because I know you and I have been speaking on the phone regularly as well. It's all very comforting to me as a parent and as a board member to bring a little bit of stability around an uncertain time. So thank you very much for all the work that's happening. And with that, I'll take any questions from the board. Mr. Borenstein.
Thank you, Mrs. Leatherbarrow, and thank you, team. The communication has been excellent, and I'm grateful for that. I wonder if we can just drill down briefly on those 29 cases in our district. I already know from the communication that many or maybe all of them were not in school related. They were just people connected to our school district. Could you just talk briefly about the protocols involved once a case has been identified, how we address that?
I'll turn that over to Christine again, because I know she deals with that every day, multiple times. I could give you my answer, but I know hers would be much more detailed than I would give.
Thanks, Dr. McKenna. So yeah, to just kind of reiterate a really important point that I think the board and the community really needs to hear is that there really is not that in-school transmission. And what that means is there hasn't been teacher to teacher, student to student, student to teacher, teacher to student, anything like that. That is not occurring. So really what that says is that, and what we know is that the cases that we are dealing with is really from what's happening outside of the school setting, because we're not seeing that in-school transmission because of these mitigating practices are really effective, and they're the strategies that we know are evidence-based for the most part and working. So that's an important takeaway. In terms of when there is a case, and Dr. McKenna said it, we are really dealing with the health department at all hours, weekends, and we will learn of a case one of two ways: from the individual themselves or a family member that reports the positive, or directly from Erie County, and nothing gets officially reported until we have a confirmation of a true positive result through Erie County. So we will confirm every positive. From there, we really collaborate with the family, with the health department, to figure out anybody that is a close contact to that individual. And then they look to the Erie County Department of Health, looks to contact those individuals that have been deemed a close contact, and they will go over the quarantine requirements for that individual, which is a 14-day quarantine from their last date of exposure. And then they generally will recommend, they don't require, but they recommend, and every family, every person who is identified as a close contact will do different things with this information, but they will recommend testing 5 days or more from that individual's last exposure to the positive individual. So if you go for testing too soon, you could potentially miss a positive. So they do recommend waiting that 5 days or more. There is rapid testing for Erie County residents that are students or staff in the building that are symptomatic only. So for symptomatic individuals that are looking to know their status, can they return to school, can they return to work, what is their status, for those symptomatic individuals who are not under a quarantine order, meaning they weren't identified as a close contact, they do qualify for rapid testing through Erie County. And we also will link families or individuals to that number so that they can set up testing, so that we can stay operational to make sure our staff is not only healthy that are returning into the building, but get them back as soon as possible, as well as our students. So that is really a nice resource if it's utilized properly, the rapid testing.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Mrs. Van Sice?
Yeah, so thank you very much. That presentation was excellent. It answered a lot of questions, helped to lessen anxiety, and I know you've been working tirelessly, everyone. I do have 2 questions, though, regarding capacity and funding. So we are currently waiting for the state to deliver the tests, which is frightening to me, because we are talking a mass production of a product that we are only one district, a large district, and everybody else is going to be waiting too. So based on that, I'll be honest, it worries me of when we get the tests and how many tests would we actually get. So are we as a district allowed? I know that Dr. McKenna and I spoke last night, and I also consulted with some medical professionals, and a suggestion was made about pooled sample testing. There's much research on that. Currently, Buff State is doing it. It's just a way to test individuals in large groups with this pooled sample testing. Are we as a district, if the state does not come through with testing, but still requires us to test, are we allowed and permitted to go with an outside group or agency that can provide tests?
Yeah, my understanding is yes, and that's one of the things that we're looking into is outside providers to see. That was earlier in the presentation when I said, we're researching that as we speak. So we were on the phone today with people, outside providers. We'll continue, discussions even tomorrow with some of our outside providers. And I know Thursday we even have an appointment with some folks that we're supposed to be talking regarding the situation as well. I know one of the situations we're researching too, and Kristen, you can talk a little bit about, is we may have to become an LSL. So I think we're going to start the application process so that we can become a site, but we have to be careful with that because we have to look with our insurance company whether they're going to cover it. Now, here's the thing. If we did the testing ourselves, insurance said they wouldn't cover it. But if we partner with another agency, then they would be willing to cover it. So that's why we're exploring these options right now as we speak. And I think, Christine, you reached out about the application for an SL today, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that because I think real possibility here.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple important things to really note is that our understanding too from Erie County is if New York State is not supplying the tests, the clock, even though we're in this yellow zone, the clock doesn't start ticking until those tests are really in hand. So they're going to go to Erie County, then disperse from there. So really, until those tests are here, the clock hasn't officially started, despite that yellow zone designation. And again, looking at different zip codes and how the zones were supposed to work, because really the governor can do what he wants. He can designate street lines, he can do zip codes, it can be by building. So really, we anticipate too to hear some additional information next week is our understanding too with regard to more about the zones. And we know again all of Erie County is yellow, but are they going to do any more designations next week, just really honing in on different zip codes and different hotspots, because that was the original intent of this micro cluster. So yeah, we're exploring every option, really looking to partner, as Dr. McKenna mentioned, to really have that manpower, that capacity to test. We're open to a lot of different options. Things, as we know with COVID, change minute by minute sometimes. So really Erie County is waiting on some additional guidelines from the state, as are we. but we continue to explore different options. John mentioned the limited lab, the LSL, and we are looking at that application to really, those sites that we kind of mentioned, to really see if that is, how long that will take. Is that something, that we do need to pursue no matter who's doing the testing, if it's someone that we are partnering with, and what exactly that means. So we have that application, and we're in the process of looking into that option, as we are many different options.
Great, thank you.
As we look into these options too, that's why we want to make sure they're in consultation also with NYSER, our insurance carrier, and we want to get things vetted through legal. We want to make sure that whatever decisions that we do make sense from our insurance perspective and from a legal perspective. So these are the things that we're working on these this afternoon, and we're going to continue working the problem until we get the solution.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to ask about the funding. If the state is providing the tests, will they be basically footing the bill? Is there going to be an additional charge to us? Or if we need to go with an outside agency, does the burden fall on the district? Would there be aid provided? What does the funding look like for this?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Mirsky for this. I know that we did get some funding, Tom, and I'll let you talk about that. But I know we'll have to incur costs, I'm sure, with going with an outside agency. But Tom, I'll let you talk about the funding.
Sure. We have three options. The first option, which is the least option we want to access, is our general fund. And that would be out of our 2020-21 budget. But we have two other options that I think may become available. One is CARES Act funding. We have not used all the CARES Act dollars that have been allocated us, especially the ones we received from Erie County. So what we would be responsible for from our initial discussions, as Dr. McKenna and Christine mentioned, would be some type of hourly rate for any outside firm, but the tests themselves and everything, it's our understanding, are covered by the county, so there's no expense there. So I do believe that CARES Act funding would pick up those costs. The third option would be FEMA. We've filed 2 FEMA claims to date. We've received almost $200,000 from FEMA. And so I will be looking, we have a FEMA meeting every week. And so this coming week, I'm going to propose to see whether they would actually cover the costs for the payment to an outside firm for their support of professional support.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. I appreciate it.
Mary, do you want to go? Oh,
thank you. Again, thanks for the presentation. One of the pieces that I really appreciate is seeing how much work you are putting into trying to make this work. I'm glad that we have this option for our remote families to continue their education, but we do have a high percentage of families that are appreciating and enjoying our HighFlex model for those kids that are coming to school. So I really appreciate the work that's being done to try to keep this model in play where we have both of these options in person or at home. My question is about the survey that came home today. When parents are considering whether or not they feel comfortable having their child tested, I'm thinking about the information you shared, how many students would need to be tested per week. And it looks like we've identified some testing sites. I know that we're still in the planning stages. My question is there a deadline as far as when kids get tested? So the guidance at this point in time seems to be per week. Does that mean that these students that are randomly selected have to do this on Monday morning and wait until their test comes? Is it something where families have to consider their child being around others, or do you know if it's something that they could, as long as it gets done throughout the week? I'm just trying to wrap my head around the logistics of it, and as a parent, what that would look like for children.
Through the discussions we had today, what we'd like to do is really get a schedule. and have the students schedule their tests. And we would hope that they could schedule it at times that work best for, for them and their families. That was my understanding today. I know, Tom, you were part of those conversations today too. I believe that was, and we're going to try to work around. So example, if you're a Monday and Tuesday, a cohort A student, we probably try to schedule you on Thursday and Friday and vice versa. And so we looked at trying to find schedules, and the companies that we were talking today, I think that's what we decided, that if we go in those directions, we would make schedules and try to fit them the best we could around the existing schedules to try not to disrupt school or as little as possible. Is that your understanding, Tom?
Yeah, that's right, Dr. McKenna. We, first thing is, I don't think we've got clarification from Erie County Department of Health yet on when the testing results are due into them. But we're going under the assumption that we have basically a full week to do the testing. And our initial conversations were to provide 5 days and possibly even a Saturday for testing purposes with some late nights. So it's flex hours. That was something that we wanted to make sure we provided as much options to our families as possible, as well as to our staff, because we have staff, as you know, that are on second shift. So we have to accommodate everybody.
Excellent. That's really good to hear. Thank you. And it sounds like I just want to clarify from what you said before that assuming we have a plan in place, that we don't have to pause anything or we're not forced to go remote until we start testing, that we can continue as normal until these tests arrive. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding.
Great. Well, given the fact that we're not seeing school transmission to be an issue from what Christine Harding shared with us, I think that that's excellent that we're exploring all of these options and allowing our HighFlex model that we saw seems to be working very well to continue. So thank you very much for all your work on this, for the constant communication, and I appreciate the updates that are coming daily, regularly to families. Thank you for continuing that communication with us all.
Thank you. Mike?
Mr. Viscalia has his hand up.
Yeah, actually, Ms. Van Scice and Ms. Beeger answered or asked two of the questions I was going to ask, so that's great. I did want to at least say that I'm happy to hear that we're attempting to continue school even in a yellow zone, considering other districts have thought of doing different things, because I think it's very imperative that we keep our students in school as long as possible. That's an important thing, I know to our community and myself. So I'm very happy to hear that you guys are working so hard and diligently to accomplish that. I know this isn't easy. I also like to hear that Dr. McKenna has been working with other superintendents and in communication, which really helps the entire community of Erie County, not just our school district. So I'm happy to hear that. Kind of just a question on top of with the consent, if I heard right with my notes. So we don't know yet if a child does not want to consent, if they're not allowed to come into school then? Is that still kind of out there? So if
I get what I heard today, and that is, from the county's perspective, the county executive today said that if people refuse, students and staff, that they would have to be held out of school. But I know that, so that was what was said today. But I know that the superintendents, wanted clarification on that because we couldn't find anything in writing. I know that the county executive said that, and not that we don't believe him, but I know that when we looked at parts of the state that are in the yellow zone right now, that was not a requirement for other parts of the state. So we wanted to we want to make sure we have absolute clarification, because that's a big one, that's a big thing. So we want to make sure that we have it absolutely correct when we, publish something in doubt. So it's definitely worth waiting a couple of days to make sure we get proper clarification on that. And so that's where we are. I know that we just want to make sure that, and we're supposed to be getting additional guidance that's supposed to be coming out, by the end of the week. So we're hoping that that'll be part of a stronger clarification piece in writing, because right now we haven't seen anything in writing, you know what I mean, that absolutely positively clarifies it. So, and since there's some different things that have happened in different parts of the state, we just want to make sure that whatever we do, it's what we're supposed to do. And it could be that Erie County is just different than another county. I mean, you know, the Erie County Department of Health is, you know, they basically, we have to go by their guidance. So right now, still waiting for additional guidance with that particular question.
Okay, no, that's fine. And as soon as you know, if you could, you know, let us know and the public know, I think that's important considering, you know, it's hard to fathom, you know, a kindergartner having to do it, which, you know, it's just the life we're living right now, though. I know that is not our doing. It's, you know, we have to follow the quarantine rules and somewhat, but if, you know, as soon as we find out that answer, if we can let everyone know, that would be very much appreciated. And then just in terms of the testing sites, you did mention, which I was glad to hear, trying to, you know, not disturb in school learning at times, whether it's cohort A, maybe doing testing on Thursdays and Fridays. If a random student is picked that is in elementary school, will there be times designated, or has there been thought or planned times designated for after school where parents are working, where they're able to bring a student to that testing area? I'm sure this has been thought of, but it's just questions I had to make sure we're, you know, thinking of every aspect that goes into this.
Yeah, I think as Tom was saying, that we're looking at flexible hours and, you know, after school hours on weekends, correct, Tom?
That's correct, John. We're going to try and have some later hours in the evening, and we'll be working out the specifics as we go a little bit further in our discussions with the vendor.
I appreciate it. That sounds great. I'm glad you guys are working to that, because that helps families, and I think that'll put a little bit of ease into all of us, knowing that it won't disturb another aspect of someone's day or life, because, you know, it's tough right now. But again, I really appreciate you guys working so hard and diligently to make sure our kids are staying in school at this time, even though we've gone into yellow, you know, and hopefully we can get it down where it's not in orange or red. But I appreciate everything, and thank you for the answers to my questions.
Thank you, Mike. Crystal.
Ms. Casper.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the presentation and the information that you've given so far. I just wanted clarification on one point in terms of the 20% random sample testing. Is that per school building, that 20% of each building needs to be tested per week for those that are in person?
Yes, that's my understanding, and validate that with Christine. And we've broken down all the buildings too. So if it ever came down to like the real micro clusters, that we have every school broken down by their 20 and 25% of each. So right now the yellow is throughout the whole district, but it could be that it really becomes a micro cluster and could only be one building or two buildings. So we did take the time to make sure that we broke down each building to make sure we had the 20% each building, because I believe that that's we have to break it down per building. Correct, Christine?
Yep, that's correct. So you're looking at 20% of your on-site population for each school building. So we broke it down like that, and then we broke it down into zip codes as well. And then obviously did the entire district population as well that's on site.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board from the community update? Okay, we're now going to move towards public expression. Dr. McCleary is going to read the public expression statement. And I just want to add that if members of the public do ask questions during public expression, I'm going to ask Mrs. Carey to just take note of those questions, and we'll make sure that they all get turned over to Mr. Filipowski and Dr. McKenna so that they can become part of our question and answer document that can go up on the website. Because as Dr. McCleary will read in a moment, during public expression, it's an opportunity for us as board members to listen, and we're happy to do so, but we will not be providing time to answer questions tonight. Thank you for your understanding. Go ahead, Dr. McCleary.
Okay. Welcome to all who have registered to observe this regular Zoom board meeting. Per policy 1510, the board has set aside 30 minutes for public expression, a time when we invite members of the community to share ideas and concerns with us. We welcome this opportunity to hear from you. Each person is given up to 3 minutes in which to address the board. We're changing things up a little bit tonight in that at 2.5 minutes, Mrs. Van Cise will notify you that there's 30 seconds left, and at 3 minutes, she will interrupt and thank you for your remarks. And then I will call on the next person on the list. This is a meeting held in public rather than a public meeting, which means we will not be engaging in a dialogue with members of the community this evening. Rest assured, we are listening carefully and we take seriously what you have to say. We would also like to ask that you demonstrate respect for us and for one another by speaking to the issues, giving us ideas and sharing your opinions, but not engaging in any personal attacks. Thank you for your cooperation. Those who have pre-registered for public expression will be called on, and then if there is time allowed, I will call on those others who are interested in addressing the board by asking you to raise your virtual Zoom hand. Okay. So the first person registered to speak is Kaylee Covert. I'm going to give Mr. Filipowski time to see if Ms. Covert is here. I can't hear anything from Mr. Filipowski, so I'm assuming that Kaylee is not here, and we'll move on. Next person is Terry King. Okay.
Now it look like Terry King is in the room.
All right, thank you. Next person is Darlene McClay.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually part of the Williamsville Students First Group, and I have a question actually for Mrs. Leatherbarrow. Since the WTA contract expires at the end of this school year, the Board of Education will clearly now be responsible for negotiating and approving a new contract. Does the board intend to do a search for a new superintendent prior to this contract negotiation?
That, Ms. McClay, that's the extent of your question?
I'd like to give Mrs. Leatherbarrow a minute to answer.
I'm sorry, if you remember when we began, I stated that members of the board will not be engaging in dialogue. We will make a note of what our residents have asked and add that to our questions and answers to be responded to at a later time.
Okay, well, I do have one, I guess, other point then. At the last community forum, Mrs. Leatherbarrow stated that community members and parents, the avenue to speak to the Board of Education was only through the PTA. And I want to state that community members, including myself, feel very offended by the idea that we have to pay a membership to an organization to communicate with you. You also demonstrated tonight that you're unwilling to communicate. I'm a parent in the district, and I don't understand why the Board of Education, where my children go to school, I don't have the ability to communicate with you and get a reasonable response. I have sent emails and I get a canned response. It's not a response to my questions, not a response to my issue. It is a cut and paste response that some administrative individual is sending to me. As a member of the Williamsville Student First Group and as a parent, and I've been a parent in this district for almost 20 years, I find it unconscionable that the Board of Education is out of touch for parents in this district. And I would like to request that Mrs. Leatherbarrow and Dr. McKenna change that and open up a communication forum with any interested parent.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Dr. Reddy.
I don't see Dr. Reddy in as an attendee.
Thank you. Next person scheduled to speak is Jonathan Rich.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Your time is ready now.
Good evening. You know, it's an interesting fact. I actually have texts from Dr. Reddy and Dr. King both saying that they have removed themselves from the meeting because we pushed public expression back an hour and 45 minutes. I'm not really sure why that took place. One small piece of advice from Ms. Harding, when you're trying to compare the COVID test given to high school students, try not to compare it to a pregnancy test. That's a little jarring for some of us high school parents. But again, you know, we spoke last month about communication, and I'm back speaking this month about communication. So not only was the meeting invite not sent out via Blitzmail again, it wasn't on the Board of Education website. I had to find it via a Twitter feed. I would like a commitment from the board, from Dr. McKenna, that the invite to the Board of Education meeting is going to go out on time through WITS next month. I know it's not comfortable having us on this meeting asking you to be accountable, but allowing that invite to go out through WITS is going to make it easier for people to join this meeting and comment. And you know, public comment is an important part of this meeting. It's going to get more important as we run up to next May. I don't think it was appropriate to present the presentations from Dr. McKenna, which I think were good, to such a small group of parents instead of to the district at large. I think that it was a waste of my time personally, and as I said, several other people have jumped off the meeting because things were delayed, and I realize that that was intentional, but I'm not very much a fan of it. You know, one of the things Dr. McKenna mentioned during his discussion, his lengthy discussion, was that he's met with union leaders, and I find that interesting because he doesn't work for union leaders. He works for district taxpayers. He works for district parents, and to date, he's tried very, very hard to prevent himself from having to answer to district parents or district taxpayers. We still don't know what the material difference is between HighFlex and the hybrid model. We see a video from Tom Fish. I'm sure everyone knows who Tom Fish is. And so we have Tom Fish telling
30 seconds, please.
He is in the model. And we've heard it's flexible for teachers. We've heard it's flexible repeatedly for teachers, but we don't know what the outcomes for students are. And I really want this district, to start focusing on outcomes for students above anything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Our next speaker is Kelly Sandberg. The list that I have doesn't show me if some of these individuals are here.
There are two Kellys in the weight room. Only one has a last name, the other does not. So I'm not sure if Mrs. Sandberg is in as an attendee or not based on the names that are populated on the list currently.
Oh, so neither one of them is Sandberg as a choice?
No, Dr. McCleary.
Okay. Then we'll move on and Kelly can chime back in if she feels that we can get a connection with her. Thank you.
There is a Kelly who just raised her hand. This might be her. Deb, if you want to try to bring her in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Are you Kelly Sandberg?
I am. I just am horrible at working Zoom.
That's quite all right. Thank you. Go ahead, please. Your time starts now.
Truly, it's kind of a waste, I guess. You guys really have answered all of my questions amazingly already. So I am super happy with the meeting tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. The next person is Kristen Santamaria.
I do not see Mrs. Santa Maria in the attendee list.
Okay. Next is Tim Terrell. Terrell?
Terrell.
Terrell, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Go ahead. Your time starts now.
All right. So I'm a member of the Williamsville Students First group. And along the lines of the two before me, my comments revolve around transparency of communication. It's coming across, if the board is actually listening and interested, it's coming across like political tactics, trying to hide behind legal statements that say that certain concerns of the parents and taxpayers of the community are very interested in knowing and understanding, which is the events that transpired to how the school year started off as horrifically as it did. And I find that very shameful, and I really would like to have some open communication. As was also said, I find it absolutely shocking and also very unreasonable that these folks are not made available. So this is something that is important to all parents, and we can have a respectful two-way dialogue. But what's going to happen is if it doesn't happen at some point, they will be creating, the board will be creating a rift between the parents of the students who are your ultimate, the people that you're supposed to be serving, right, as servants. So I really hope that you will listen to that, take it to heart, and understand that we really deserve this two-way communication. And if it doesn't happen, people will start getting more and more upset, and that'll turn into anger. And that's not what we want, because we are supposed to all be here for our children's education. My children are suffering pretty strongly by not being in school. We knew a second wave of COVID was coming, so this was not hard to guess. And so it's hitting. And now, as predicted, the kids will be back out of school. They should have been in school on day one, like lots of other districts. We should have had all this stuff figured out during the summer, and it should have been implemented. And there's no reason not to. I'm a tech guy. I built a remote.
30 seconds, please.
I built a remote scouting program for the troop that my boys are in, and we ranked up our boys remotely. These are things that can be done and should have been done. And I respectfully ask that the board really consider a much more public two-way dialogue and much more consistently, and not have these political tactics, because that's what it's coming across as. If that's not your intent, please change it and make it clear that you really want to work with us so that we can do what's best for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kirsten Webb. Excuse me, Webb.
I do not see Mrs. Webb in the attendee list. However, Dr. McCleary, Mr. King has joined and has his hand raised. I know you called on him earlier.
I was just going to say the same thing. Thank you. Terry King, if you'd like to start your 3 minutes now, please go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good evening. My question evolves around the budget, COVID spending to the board and Dr. McKenna. I was curious how we could assess the current levels of spending, hiring additions from the 2020 projected budget, and how this is faring out with all the additional costs that the district is bearing. I heard mention a few minutes ago about the CARES Act funding that hasn't been spent, and curious, how much is available to the district what the impact is that going to have on the 2020 budget? And how far over budget is the district currently spending based on the track of spending and related to all the additional equipment that's been purchased, infrastructure that had to be built out, and also IT personnel to manage this that has been hired now for full-time employment? Also, is that going to impact the 2021 budget as that's being prepared, and has that thought been given to that as well? My concern then rests with the property tax cap, and how is the board going to address all of the spending and these requirements that we're being asked to pay for beyond the traditional budget? And under this executive order that's now in place with the governor, does that even have to go to be voted on if it exceeds the tax cap? I think these are questions that many of us are wondering, how that's going to impact us, and the expectation for quality education at this rate of spending, and how's that going to impact us going into 2021? So if that could be addressed, and the level of spending, how it affects the 2020 budget, and what that looks like for 2021, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, as noted, we are taking down all the information that our speakers are asking, and it will be followed up. We have about 12 more minutes on our first 30-minute time period. People who have raised their hands, the next person would be Jim Sikorsky.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right. I very much have to agree with what was said before about political tactics. We still haven't heard what's going to happen yet with Dr. Marsloff and paying his salary for the year. That's going to impact the budget. The fact that the Board of Education, who happens to be a board of people that are supposed to be a check and balance for the superintendent, do not say that they knew anything about no remote school or no plan for this school year, I think is just absurd. To say that now one of these people knew not one thing about any of this, I think is a disservice to the community and robbing from the taxpayers that pay your salaries and pay the school salaries and pay the district salaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person with a hand raised is Michael Lim.
Hello. Can you guys post the new communication regarding out-of-state travel and quarantine requirements as relates to bordering states, specifically Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut? Because the last one that was sent out, I guess, a few weeks ago, some of the rules have changed through New York State. So I'm wondering if you could clarify that. And it would really be helpful if you included some examples or scenarios associated with that, including youth sports, or, we have Thanksgiving coming up. So, visiting relatives out of states, what the quarantine requirements would be once you return. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Our next speaker is Jeffrey Hoffman.
Good evening. My question is more on the elementary level with school holidays. When there's a week where there's a school holiday, has any thought been given to maybe use that Wednesday as an in-school for the students? That was my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen Asen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I have a question. Would the board consider postponing teacher union negotiations? We're in the middle of a pandemic and a very disrupted school year. And we have an interim superintendent at the moment. Is there any harm in waiting to do the teacher union negotiations? That's it.
Thank you for the question. Next speaker is Brooke Lerner.
Hi, I'm interested in knowing what the board is doing to ensure that we have the proper staffing I, like most people, read in the paper about the people that were hired this summer and then fired the next day. And so was shocked to learn when I tried to get my son into a lab or AIS at Transit Middle that they weren't placing him in one of the labs because they didn't have the staff. So here it is November when he's finally been assigned to get the help that he needs. So I'm also wondering what exactly the board is going to do to help these kids that we've let get farther and farther behind because of the poor planning that's gone on, because of our inability to have figured out how to proceed after 10 weeks of summer vacation. What are you going to do to ensure that these kids that are getting left behind get caught back up? I too am a little dismayed at, honestly, this is the first board meeting I've attended, and I think it's really disappointing that the information wasn't readily available. I just happened upon it through the Williamsville Students First group, and I think that should change. There needs to be better dialogue, and I think that while the daily videos were wonderful, they really aren't giving the concrete information about what's happening to our children and how we can truly partner to ensure that our children aren't getting left behind in this truly awful period. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Lori Weinstein.
Hi. Are
Go
you
ahead.
there?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Boy, I waited a long time to say something tonight. I've been a parent in the district for well over 20 years as well. I actually had been to the district office frequently in the past. There was quite an open door policy. I felt that the communication was much better. Open door policy meaning not just physically, but through email or just through any type of or any form of communication. I don't appreciate that our only access to the acting superintendent is through his video footage. I just feel that there should be more of a communication with the parents on a parent level, not just us sitting through an hour-and-a-half meeting to be able to voice our opinions. I would like to know what's going on with Dr. Martzloff and the investigation with him, what we're going to do about the impact on our budget with having both of their salaries on top of everything else. And really, I'm just a little upset with the treatment by the Board of Education to the parents of this district in general, in terms of what they feel that we need to know versus what they feel we don't need to know. I feel that we pay the taxes. These are our kids going to these schools, and we have every right to know what's going on and not have to bang down the doors for some information. Thank you.
Thank you. As we close in on our allotted half an hour, we have only one more speaker, Nadine Barnes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I wanted to present an idea to the board to consider, unless they already have, taking more control of the testing that needs to be done and model after the Niagara Falls School District, where the superintendent, through his leadership and insight, was able to become an official COVID testing facility, and 3 of their schools they bought machines to do the quick swab. Each machine costs $3,000 and the test kits are $25. It seems like a great avenue to take control of being able to test up to the state standards and not be possibly closed down if we don't get tests or if there's a snafu on that end. And it does sound like there's a lot of gray areas on that end. So I would like the board to research this, talk to Superintendent Lori in Niagara Falls, and learn how they got certified through the Department of Health and how they're executing the strategy. I think it's award-winning, and it deems a conversation and some research. And I think our kids deserve this opportunity so that we are in control going forward of the testing demands that are being placed on us. And if anybody wants to talk to me about this, I've done a lot of research on it. I'll be happy to email it to you or do help with any research on my end as well. Thank you.
And thank you. This is the end of our half an hour for public comment. Please remember that notes have been taken from each of the speakers, and these are topics that we will continue to look at. Thank you. Send it back to you, Mrs. Leatherbarrow.
Thank you, Dr. McCleary, and thank you to all of our speakers tonight. We're moving into our consent agenda approval. May I have a motion, please, to approve consent agenda items 6, personnel, 7, business, 8, special needs and student activities as presented. Mr. Lemay, thank you. Mr. Borenstein, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. I would like to thank the following retirees for their service to the district. Donald Beeler, laborer at North High School for 39 years of service. Lawrence Edenholm, part-time cleaner at South High School. And Anthony Oliver, part-time teacher aide at Mill Mill. Thank you for your service. Is there a motion, please, to approve the October 13th regular board meeting minutes? Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Mr. Lemay, second. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. President's report. The board held a community forum on October 17th. We originally planned for 9 to 11. We did extend to 12 o'clock because our opening presentation ran over a bit, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to hear from as many community members as possible. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the 17th and called in with your questions and comments. Item B is a quick discussion on school building visits. I wanted to share with the board that when Mrs. Van Slyce and I met with Dr. McKenna for our agenda planning meeting last week, we did discuss having a board visit, and we came up with the idea of doing a combination of a KC North visit. We hope to be able to do this prior to our December board meeting. Dr. McKenna, I want to give you a chance to let us know if that's still a possibility, and also then to get feedback on the board, considering now that we are now, of course, in yellow zone and uncertain of what's going to happen, if that's something the board is still comfortable with, or if we want to pause on that. Dr. McKenna, I'll let you comment on that first.
Well, we're definitely would love you to come and see. I know I spoke with principals and we're just looking at some dates, and we definitely can get a visitation done, you know, before the next board meeting. In fact, I think what we talked about was doing one at Casey and North, and then so you could see the capital project that's being done also. So we just got to iron out the date. I know that the principals are excited about having you if you stop by. We just haven't solidified the date, but I guess we should take a look at this next week, see what exactly happens with your orange-red zones right now. And I think that after we see what happens in this next week, then we'll set the date. I'm hoping that the numbers get better, and I'm hoping that we can keep, you know what I mean, that we don't go into orange or red zones. And if that's the case, then we'll get, you know, we'll solidify the date in the next couple of weeks. But if we don't go into orange and red zones, I'm quite sure that we can make we can make a visitation happen before the next board meeting.
Okay, is that something that the board would be comfortable with? Does anyone have an opinion one way or the other? Mrs. Beeger?
Yeah, I would love that. I am glad that I've been missing those, and it would be really good to see things in action. It would be great to see interact with faculty and staff. And, you know, we shared before, there's effective practices happening in our schools, and I feel, you know, we haven't been seeing school transmission. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't go visit as long as we're following the procedure that's in place. So thank you for thinking on that, and I look forward to finding out when our first one will be.
I'll set, I will
Any
set it
other
up.
feedback from? Oh, you're good.
No, I was just gonna
Okay,
say, we'll see what happens in the next week with the orange zone, and I'll get some tentative dates and I'll send them to, and we'll try to make sure that we get that done before next board meeting, as long as I guess the orange, red, and yellow zones cooperate.
Perfect, thank you. Item 10C is our Erie County Association of School Boards. There are important dates for upcoming events listed in board docs. There was also an email that came through today about the speedboarding event. That event is going to be subject to change because of where we are right now with our COVID numbers. And I did also see the message that the legislative event now will be open to everyone because it's going virtual, and it's just going to be $5 per board member. So I believe it was Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner that was signed up for that, but if there's anyone else that's interested in attending that, you can let us know now or give your name to Mrs. Carey. Any other information that anyone wants to report on for ECASB? No? Okay. So our New York State School Board Association, Mr. Borenstein attended the NISBA convention. Dr. McCleary attended the pre-convention school law seminar, and Mr. LeMay was the voting delegate at the annual business meeting. I want to thank the three of you for your service and time for those conferences. Reports that were submitted were very helpful and detailed, so thank you for those. And does anyone wish to report on anything related to their experience at this year's convention? Mr. Borenstein.
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize. My written report is tardy, but I do plan to submit it so that everybody can see all the great sessions that I attended. And of course, the most thrilling part for me was the recognition of Judy Katz as the Dyer Award recipient. And so it was a great week, and I'll report in writing to everyone.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on. May I have a motion, please, to approve agenda items 10E, the NISBA membership dues, and 10F, the work of the Board of Education for 2020-2021 as presented. Okay, Mr. Viscalia, thank you. Mrs. Van Slyce is a second. Any discussion on either of those two items? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. All right, moving back to our superintendent's report, Dr. McKenna did give his community update, and we thank you for doing that. That was a board decision to do it ahead of public expression. We thought it would be helpful to provide the public with as much information as possible prior to them going on to ask questions. And it seemed like that was received well by some, but not by others. So we do apologize if that was a barrier to you. Our strategic planning update, Dr. McKenna, would you like to give us an update on strategic planning?
Yes, we have a meeting on December 9th. We had to move it because there was a conflict with the parent-teacher conferences in November, but we are all set for December 9th and looking forward to getting the committee back together. The leader we've been working, I know myself and Dr. Balin and a few others have been working to prepare, and we're excited about the strategic planning committee and looking forward to getting the team back together. And after we meet, we'll be happy to give a report back because we're excited about the changes we have planned.
Thank you. Any questions regarding strategic planning from the board? Okay, moving on to our enrollment projections and the impact on open enrollment. Back to Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, I know that this is Dr. Grossman has this, and I'm going to Mr. Scanzuzo. I know you've worked with Dr. Grossman on this. Do you want to give him a quick introduction? And I know that he's going to be giving a report to us here about the open enrollment projections.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. McKenna. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Grossman, who's working with the Red Group out of Penfield, New York. He's done this projection enrollment for us, this annual projection enrollment for us for many years. So this year, he's going to present to you the Williamsville Central School District Enrollment Projection Report for 2020. Talk about enrollment factors such as changes in the kindergarten class, our current enrollment, migration, those kinds of things. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grossman. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Okay. Hello. There we are. I hope everyone can see and hear me. Can you?
Yep.
Good. Okay. I'll ask that the slide presentation be put up. Okay, very good. First, I just wanted to say I was delighted to hear the name Judy Katz. I hadn't heard it in a long time. She is an old friend of mine from years ago when we would go to the school boards conferences. I was assistant superintendent at the Onondaga, Cortland, Madison, BOCES. And she was a great mentor, and turns out she was related to my wife. So we really had some great conversations, and it was a great surprise and it was great for me to see her. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to complete the study again for another year. This year has been like no other, and the beginning of this meeting is certainly evidence of that. It's quite amazing, and it did affect enrollments, I believe. The factors affecting enrollments. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So these factors that we go over every year affect enrollment, and those haven't changed, but certainly the enrollment itself has been affected by the pandemic, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. And you'll notice that in the list there of factors, I've changed in-migration to migration because now, for the first time since I've been doing this, the rate of migration of students has changed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So next slide, please. The key enrollment factors haven't changed. It's obviously going to be the changes in the kindergarten class size, the changes in the current enrollment, if any, and migration, including the effects of the pandemic. So it's still migration, but now we have the effects of something that was not anticipated, prior to what's happening now. So the next slide, please. So we'll talk about K-12, we'll then talk about elementary school, then we'll talk about middle school, high school. We'll summarize and we'll have some conclusions. Okay, next slide. All right, so we always go over this slide. We talk about the live births compared to kindergarten enrollments 5 years later, and it's an indicator. It's not an exact match. And you can see how closely it follows with some changes here and there. And this year I wasn't able to get the 2018 birth rates because I imagine the people in the Department of Vital Statistics at the state have been a little preoccupied with other things. So they have not updated that chart. But you can see that the current year we had a definite difference in the difference between the kindergarten enrollment and the live birth numbers. And it's closed down from about 20% on average to 12%. So when I did the projections going forward, I assumed that some of these things are going to change going forward, I hope, with new vaccines and developments along those lines, that in the next years to come, we won't be dealing with the type of situation we're dealing with now. The economy will improve and so on. So I did keep in a positive in-migration factor, but it certainly didn't occur this year. And the next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the current enrollments, and we can clearly see, as we have been seeing, the kindergarten classes are going to be smaller than the graduating classes. But the really big classes are moving out, the 856, the 848. And so some of the differences as time goes on are going to be smaller, like a difference between 710 and 690, the third and fourth grade. They won't be quite as marked. We really don't know how the economic situation will affect more students moving into the district in the future. So we kind of, downgraded a little bit our expectations on that. Next slide, as you'll see. So I do have a statement in here about the pandemic. It hit in very late in 2019 and into 2020, and I think the numbers indicate that it impacted enrollments by a factor of minus 3.4% or 3.6% over the projections. And that was because fewer new students came into the district and more students transferred into non-public options. Continuing effects remain to be seen depending on the duration of the pandemic. Next slide. Also, in the report, I do break out, I was provided by the district with some statistics on non-public enrollment, and it was interesting to see that 117 more students than prior year had gone to non-public in K-6, and 47 more had gone to non-public in 7-12. And what that's going to do in the future in terms of students returning, you don't know. But that was why that accounted for half of the decrease from the prior year, and the other half was accounted for by the difference between the kindergarten and the graduating class. So there was virtually no in-migration. It was zero. So our assumptions are that kindergartens will be smaller. Migration may offset, and I added the word may, some attrition. The robustness of the economy will continue to be in question for some time, and that affects housing, and that affects real estate, and so on and so forth. Other factors will stay stable for the period. Next slide. Okay, so what happened the last 5 years? Well, we had in K-12, we had very stable, sort of just a minor decrease because of the fact that students were moving into the district, and then a bump down from last year to this year. And so the 5-year decrease was 373 students. Next. And then our projected enrollment, you can see our level pretty much for the next 5 years. And then depending on, again, kindergarten classes and what happens with in-migration, I'm projecting that over the next next 10 years, it'll be basically the same. 138 is probably within the margin of error. So basically a fairly stable K-12 enrollment. The thing is, in the past, I bumped it up. It's bumped down because of what's been happening. So that in the past we were looking at 9,900, and now we're looking at like 9,700 or 9,600. Okay, next. Okay, so let's start looking at the elementary schools. We have a 5-year history, and we see that actually there was an increase even with the situation, the pandemic, because so many of the classes that were large in the 4th grade had already moved out, and there's kind of a leveling out here of the effect of incoming classes and classes that are leaving. Next slide. But we project the same thing occurring grades K-4 for the next 5 years. Very stable, pretty much the same numbers overall. Again, a difference of 58 is, it could be minus or plus 58. It's pretty much within the margin of error. Next slide. And the history leading up to this year of your middle schools is, you'll see, is quite different. And the main reason for that is some really big classes moving out, leaving to go to the high school, and being replaced by smaller classes coming in from K4. So we are projecting a significant decrease of about 300 students over the next 5 years in the grades 5 through 8. Okay, next slide. And then grades 5 through 8 projected, that will level out, we anticipate, and the numbers worked out to about a 96 student increase going forward 5 years. So not a big difference going forward. All right, next slide. So now we're at high school, and you can see that the past 5 years, the classes have been the 700s, 800s, some 900s moving out, but in the past 5 years, it's only decreased a net of 53 students. So that's pretty much stable. Then the next slide, we see those larger classes will be moving out, replaced by some smaller classes, and we're anticipating a decrease of 196 or around 200 students in all the high schools, grades 9 through 12. Okay, we'll go to the last slide. And this is a busy slide. I have some notes here I want to look at. So the current year, we have 9,599 students in October when the beds numbers were submitted. And 5 years from now, we're looking at 9,535 students, if our assumptions are correct. So there's literally going to be no change in the overall enrollments, but there'll be little ups and downs as you look down the chart between this year and next year, and in 5 years. There'll be some little ups and downs, but nothing significant. And as far as open enrollment, which I didn't really look at this year because it was such an unusual situation, and the students are coming in different models and not all students in the school at the same time. But the open enrollment doesn't seem to have any effect on these numbers. It's not significant. It does have an effect, but it's not significant. Okay, and then on the last slide, all right, so in the conclusion, the K-12 enrollments will level out, small increases in elementary and middle and decreases in the high school level. No changes in attendance. Actually, that should be, let's see, small increases in the elementary, and I think I said that there'll be decreases in the high school and the middle level. So there's an error there. No changes in attendance areas or feeder patterns will be necessary. As far as any information that I've gotten, I don't know if there are other plans or other things happening in the district I'm not aware of. No major changes in facilities will be necessary strictly due to enrollment. And the duration of the pandemic will have a negative effect on the economy and consequently the ability for families to relocate into the district. And I did a study that I talk about in the report about how there seems to be almost as many real estate transactions, but it must be of a different nature than in past years, but it must be of a different nature than in past years because it hasn't caused more students to come in to all the grade levels in the district. So, that would be the in-migration effect. And so the last slide is just thank you very much again. And I hope the report is useful, and we'll see what happens. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Grossman. It is very helpful. Right in the midst now of doing our staffing, for next year. So this report is critical to us. It gives us great information as we plan for the future. We're doing our staffing. It helps with our budgeting. It's a very critical piece of information. So thank you very much for this detailed report. We appreciate it.
Okay, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it. Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's any questions. I think
Yeah,
Mary
yeah.
might-
Let's, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, it's actually not a question, but just a comment of something I noticed in the report that I want to make sure the district's aware of. I realize for elementary schools overall that there's no concern, and in the conclusion it says we don't have to worry about attendance or things of that nature. But I know there's been concern over the last year at Heim Elementary at the numbers that are rising. One of the reasons for that concern is that there's been some major construction in that area, and a lot of larger single-family homes have been built. So the the 6-year or 5-year projection showed an additional 60 kids at Heim Elementary, which I think is realistic. So I just want to make sure our district is looking at that, because I know obviously things are crazy and not normal classroom structure right now, but we always want to keep our eye on that class size and the room that we have for the students there. So I just thought that was something of note that I wanted to make sure our district saw. And I don't see it really impacted in high, middle, or north as much, but which would be that feeder pattern. But at Heim L, those numbers really were projected to go quite high. It's just that the other schools seem to be going down a little, so it seems to even out.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
How's my
Mr.
lighting?
Grossman, for your report.
Thank you.
You're doing great.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks.
Thank you again. So
Bye.
at this time, we're going to go ahead and take a vote on the resolution for open enrollment schools. May I have a motion, please, to approve agenda item 11D, which is the resolution determining open enrollment schools at Dodge Elementary, Forest Elementary, Casey Middle, Heim Middle, East High School, North High School, and South High School. Mrs. Kazmierzak-Bogner, thank you. Mr. Mecca, second. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. May I have motion, please, to approve 11E, the amended code of conduct, and 11F to adopt the retention and disposition schedule for New York Local Government Records LGS 1, formerly the Ed 1 retention schedule, as presented. Mr. Borenstein, thank you. Mrs. Eager, second. Is there any discussion on these motions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Moving on to our policy updates, we have a first reading of a new policy, which is 3421, the Title IX in sex discrimination, and the revised policy of 5676, privacy and security for student data and teacher and principal data. Is there a motion, please, for the first reading of new policy 3421, 5676, those two policies? Is there a motion for those readings? Thank you, Mrs. Van Sies. Ms. Kazmierzak-Bogner, second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion or opposed, abstentions, motion carried unanimously. And now is there a motion, please, to table the policy 3421 and revise policy 5676 for a second reading and adoption at this December 8th regular board meeting? Mr. Lemay, thank you. Mr. Mecca, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And we do that because it takes 2 meetings to pass the policies. Moving on to item 12, budget development. Dr. McKenna, will you please provide an audit recap and historical budget information to the board?
Yes, I'll turn it over to Mr. Tursky at this time, and I'll let Tom take this away.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Just bring the presentation on, please. Thank you. So this is the annual November presentation, and the purpose of this is really twofold. It's first to provide a very brief summary on the analysis of the 2019-20 audit that the board reviewed, received, and approved at the October meeting. And the second is leaning toward our first real phase of budget development for the 2021-22 school year. And in that, I present some information on the historical budget reductions. So next slide, please. So I like to begin with this, even though I know our board is much aware of this. But the audit requirement is based on a law, and actually there's several different areas of law that it requires the district to obtain an annual external audit by an independent auditor. It's Education Law 2116A and regulations of the Commissioner, Section 170.2R. So what are the items that are actually audited by the independent auditor each year? And essentially it's our general fund, which is the main fund of the district. As we all know, that's the fund that the community votes on. But in addition to that, it's the special aid fund, which has federal aid programs in it, everything from IDA to title grants funds, including also the capital fund, the debt service fund, trust and agency fund, community education fund, school child nutrition fund, and the extra classroom fund. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be concentrating just on a general fund in this part of the presentation. And I wanted to go over the differences that we see when it comes to the revenue side and the expense side of our budget and how it performed as compared to the prior year and what made up the differences in the performance. So at first, you can see on the revenue lines, there was about a $5 million, $4 million change there. And that increase that we saw in the 19-20 budget was essentially equal to the tax levy increase of 3.8 million. On the expenditure side, you see that there was a pretty substantial decrease in expenses. And in reality, that was due to the restrictive purchasing practices that the district put in place really in April 2019 as a result of COVID-19. At that time, we knew that there was going to be potential aid reductions applicable to the 19-20 school year. And so as a result, we restricted purchases to be mandatory items for instructional needs. And just as a side note, that's continuing on in this school year. So what that resulted in is that we had a net change in fund balance in the general fund of about 24 million in the last year, 19-20, as compared to about 14.5 million in the prior year. But that amount from an accounting perspective requires adjusting entries, which are considered transfers out. So all of our debt payments, although they're budgeted in the general fund, they must actually be transferred out. So that's what's part of that negative number that you're seeing below, as well as the capital reserve funds. When we appropriate those funds in capital projects through the community vote, when we make those transfers, that actually appears as a transfer out. So you're seeing the reality of both those effects on those items in the transfer out. And in the this school year that we just ended, you can see that we had about a $14.5 million surplus. And again, most of that was really due to the restrictive purchasing that we put in place as a result of COVID-19. The prior year, we were pretty much right on target with only a $400,000 additional fund balance, but there also was some debt pay down that happened in that year, which the board is aware of and approved, which really establishes the long-range planning for our district. So with that, next slide, please. When we look at the balance sheet side, so where does that fund balance go? And this is really highlighting that. You can see that it really went into the asset section, which is mostly made out of cash. So that's where you see the large increase, the $12.9 million. The liability side, the 1.6 million decrease is actually the result of the way they value the teacher retirement and employee retirement systems. And again, prior to COVID-19, much of that is based upon the investment market and the type of returns that those funds, state funds, are receiving. So they were receiving high rates of return, and so that liability actually went down. I would forecast that that will go up in the near future and in the years to come, as the investment market is now not receiving the returns that it once did prior to COVID-19. So again, what this just shows is how fund balance has increased. Again, it goes back to the last slide that was in revenue and expense, and that's that $14.5 million. And as I said, you're going to see where the dollars went. Most of them went to our reserves, and I'll show you the specifics in a later slide. And as I mentioned, the other piece is the result of the retirement system decreases. I also put notes on these slides. If you have the audit, you can go back to the pages in the audit where these numbers can be cross-referenced to. Next slide, please. So when it comes to fund balance, I wanted to go over what the actual definitions are, because many times people do call fund balance everything from the unassigned fund balance to the reserves to restricted fund balance. And I think it's important, especially as we start the budget development process, that we review these items so that we have an understanding on what can and cannot be used. So I'm going to start with the assigned fund balance. And this is partly made up of two items for our particular district. One is the appropriated fund balance. That's $5,574,000. And what is that? Well, that's what's actually in our 2020-21 revenue budget. If you go into that revenue budget, you're going to see that amount is actually placed there. And because it's considered assigned to the next year's funding, that's why it shows up as assigned fund balance, and it does so actually in our audit also. The other piece that's not commonly known is encumbrances are considered assigned too. So that's the 1920 purchase orders that we have actually made in that prior fiscal year, which we feel will become payable in the new year because of varying timing issues mostly. That's why those numbers are carried over. And that accounted for about $6.4 million, which means that our total assigned fund balance, as it's applicable to the 1920 audit, is $12 million, $1,643. And again, going back, that page 14 is referencing the audit. Unassigned fund balance, on the other hand, is what is that 4% that everyone hears about. And essentially, you know whether you're at the 4% or under or above it by taking the next year's approved budget amount. And so I gave you the calculation here, $199,199,730. That's our 2021 budget times 4%. That's our maximum 4% number. As of June 30th, and as reported in our financial statements that you saw last month, we're at $7,965,601, which is underneath that amount, as reported by the auditor to the board in the October board meeting. Next slide, please. So then as we continue on, reserves are actually considered restrictive in most situations. And so what does that mean? It means that they're really meant and established for a particular purpose. So I listed here all of our reserves. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the ones I want to highlight here are, first of all, the ones that have the most dollars in them. And that will start with the capital reserve, and that's about $33.4 million to date. It's important for me to say, though, that now those reserves may only be established by a public vote, and they're for specific purposes as defined in the vote. And then secondly, the funds can only be expended by, again, a public vote. So when we do a capital project proposition, we actually list the exact capital reserve that we are looking to request that the money be appropriated toward that capital project. And so as a result, that's how those reserves are established. As I go through the funding mechanism on that, I'll share a little bit more about what is actually appropriated to current capital projects and how that affects this 33.4 million number. The other thing I want to just mention here is we've got the employment retirement system reserve, and that sub-reserve of the teacher retirement system was only made available to school districts in the last year or so. And the Board of Education approved that sub-reserve at the January meeting of 2020. Next slide, please. So this is the detail I wanted to share. This is all the transactions that impacted our reserves from the starting balances of the year that 1920 that we started with to where we ended up. And you can see all these numbers reflect the actual audits, the prior year audit, as they reflect the current year audit we just received. So what I want to point out are just a couple columns here. First of all, if you look at that second column, expenses closed to reserves, what that means is some of these reserves, as I said before, are appropriated in our revenue budget. So when we appropriate funds, we go to the expenses at the end of the year and we transfer them to the reserves. And that's what you're seeing here. That's what you're seeing under the teacher retirement ERS reserve. That's what you're seeing under the employee benefit liability, the repair reserve, and the workers' comp reserve, as well as the tax tertiary. Those are dollars that we incurred in our 2019-20 budget, and we were able to, since we appropriated it, we closed those expenses to the reserves. The next piece you see that is important is the interest posting. It's required by law that the balances that are in those reserves, the interest dollars are posted to them. So that's why you see interest posted to that. As we go forward this year and into the near future, we probably will have minimal dollars because of the interest rate market has really fallen down to close to zero. So there won't be too much more in that category. The third column then is what we did when we came to funding the reserves this year. And those are the dollars that we put in. So with that, I want to draw your attention to the ending balances, because when we did the authority that you granted myself to fund these, it was looking toward what will happen post-COVID-19. And so there's a couple things that you see happening there that were strategically planned. First of all, you're going to see increases in the unemployment, the tax tertiary, and the workers' comp reserves. That was done because those areas are likely to have a need for higher reserve levels as an outcome of COVID-19. So that is one of the reasons why they have gone up in dollar amount. Secondly, you'll see that we put dollars into the capital reserve. And that again is for our long-range planning. That will allow the district to do such things as, even though you may feel that the athletic fields, for example, are relatively new, when the turf carpet itself wears out, there'll need to be dollars to replace that. And whether these dollars are used for that will be something to be decided in the future, but that's the type of expenses as well as other building issues that we need to face in the future that these dollars will be used for. So I mentioned that 33.4 million in the capital reserve. Of that amount, we actually have had approval from the security project that was approved in June. $13 million of that money will actually go to that project. So essentially there's $20 million now in those reserves. And of that 20 million, 5.4 of that will be allocated this year to the music project. So really you're down to about $15 million in those capital reserves, which for a district our size is not that large. And again, that can only be expended if you have community approval on a future capital project. So with that, if you go down the line, you can see the total fund balance shows up at $88,102,016. And again, all the changes to 14,543,724, that reflects what I had showed on some of those earlier slides from both revenue and the balance sheet. Again, references here from page 14 and 41 if anyone wants to go back to the audits detail. Next slide, please. So what are the actual changes? I kind of went over the changes here. The one item we did add 1.5 million to the sub TRS reserve. Again, that was the first year for that. But the other thing I wanted to make mention of is, again, in our current budget, we have $4,130,000 appropriated. And, you know, as we look to the future and to future budgets and potentially some difficult fiscal times, you really have to understand that reserves are not necessarily the answer to fill the gap. And what I mean by that is if you've got revenue loss, reserves and fund balance do not necessarily have the answer for those. What you can do, though, is you can do strategic planning and use them to allow you to adjust your budgets in a multi-year facet method that does allow you to either do one of two things, which will be presented more at next month's discussion of long-range planning, either to adjust your current budget and do what I would call short budgeting. And so short budgeting is, let's say we wanted to appropriate the unemployment reserve of $300,000 in our revenue budget, and you had $300,000 this year in our unemployment budget. Next year, you may say, well, I'm going to appropriate in the expense budget $250,000, knowing I will have $300,000 in expenses. So essentially what you're saying is you're going to pick up that $50,000 from the reserve, but you must do that again in a multi-year method so that you're not caught at the end being $50,000 unbudgeted. So I'll go into that more again next month. The last thing I want to talk about reserves is that there was some executive orders that came out revolving around COVID-19, and you really need to look at the details of those. It mentioned that you could use reserves for purposes other than what they were intended. So remember how I described the restricted reserves. The details, though, are the following. You needed to repay that back to that reserve in 3 years with interest. So the question becomes, are you in a better place in 3 years to do that, or are you in a worse place in 3 years? So again, all these financial decisions must consider the future, not only the present. Next slide, please. So the impact on budget development and what we have seen from this prior fiscal year is, first of all, the restrictive purchasing procedures really have given us a number of items. First of all, they showed how much we can actually save in certain areas. And they has also established what I would consider to be baseline expense level estimates for the general fund in those areas that we will use as we develop the budget for 21-22. I think that we may, as a leadership team, and administration, start to look at maybe looking at classifying items in a little different manner. Expenses as educational mandatory, educational support, supplemental. These are areas that we'll discuss and develop such type numbers where we can then say, we know that these could be areas that may be more willing to look at for reductions if they are even needed. And then most importantly, you have to create a structure for long-term multi-year planning, whether it be budget reductions or whether it's going to be fund balance reductions or program reductions. And you need to really know what the revenue piece is going to be, because that's going to drive the budget. And is it a single year revenue reduction or is it multi-year revenue reductions? Next slide, please. So I'm going to end with some information in the historical budget book that I'm actually calling the playbook here. And the reason why, it gives you 14 years of budgets. And if you look at the totals in all these categories, we're just at above $94 million with $29 million in reductions and $64 million in increases over that time. And interestingly, the increases were about 4.3 million. And that's pretty close to what we normally do in this district. And the salary and benefit increases were actually a couple $100,000 higher every year at almost 4.6. And that's not unusual either. We usually have to come up with budget reductions to balance the budget. So with that, you know, again, looking at that information from a high summary level, the salary and benefit increases resulted in $59.4 million and 93% of the total increases. So looking at our current budget, 77% of our 2021 budget is salary and benefits. So that's the area that we're going to have to just look at very carefully as we look forward to developing the 21-22 budget and looking into the future. And next slide, please. So as we move forward with the budget development process, I think the most important thing is going to be defining the revenue loss. And this is going to be, I think, the most challenging piece, not because the district is not going to be able to really do the definition on its own, but really because that information is coming from other sources. What will be the revenue loss? Will it be a single year loss? Will it be multiple year losses? Will we receive federal aid? Will the federal aid be a single year or multiple year aid? That's unlikely to be known until we really get into the revenue process, which is probably January and February. So with that, though, we're going to have to be looking at what we know. And what we know is what I'm going to be sharing, a long-range plan in the next at the next board meeting. And it'll be quite different than what you've seen in the past, because that plan is going to have a lot of information on COVID-related issues as it pertains to the budget. And in fact, normally I provide one scenario on what the forecast is. This one's going to show 3 different scenarios on what the forecast will be as based upon what we know as of today on revenue. So with that, that was a quick summary on both the audit as well as the first steps of our budget development with the historical budget changes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matursky, as always. Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments for Mr. Matursky? Mike, is your hand up? It's hard for me to tell. No? Okay. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions at this time. I just want to thank you again, Mr. Matursky, for all the information, and I look forward to next month's report. Okay, moving on. We're going to go to 12B through E. May I have a motion to approve the following agenda items? 12B, the request for proposal for external audit services. 12C, approval of the district's management letter corrective action plan pertaining to the 2019-2020 audit. 12D, approval of the district's corrective action plan pertaining to the 2019-2020 financial statement finding encumbrances. And 12E, the sale and disposal of district property. Mr. Mecca, thank you. Mr. Viscalia, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. If you have any liaison reports, please send them to Mrs. Carey. The list of meetings dates are in board docs. There are no items to discuss under 14, 15, or 16 unless any board members wish to do so. Okay, thank you. District facilities and support services. We are going to have a quick update on our capital project. Dr. McKenna, I'll turn it back over to you for Mr. Matursky.
I'll turn it back over to Mr. Matursky.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Just a couple quick things. I included a couple photos in the board agenda item this month to show the interior work that's going on at North High School in the music edition. I think you'll see that it's been quite far along, and with walls going up, and we're seeing, you know, a similar type work over at East. And as I mentioned in the agenda item, South is a little further behind, but we're moving along well there too, now that we've gotten past some of that initial issues we had with this site. As far as planning for the security project, I just wanted to share that that is now really in full force. We've had meetings this week as well as last week with our architects. And right now we're on schedule to present those those budget and the budget information as well as the detailed construction plans to the state probably at the end of January or very early February. And that would position us to very likely bid that work sometime around October 22, and then start it in early 23 and the summer of 23. So that's what we're most likely looking at for that project.
Thank you for that. I'm a North parent, so throughout the summer, I drove my son to practice every single day, and I enjoyed watching the dirt hill turn into a wall and then turn into a building. And I enjoyed the pictures, but I would very much like to see what's really going on inside there. So I'm looking forward to hopefully a building visit very soon. At this time, may I have a motion to resolve to approve the change order as presented? Mr. Lemay, thank you. Mrs. Beeger, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. We have no items to discuss under special needs and student activities. Does anyone have a request or matter to discuss under committee of the whole? All right, seeing none. We, for correspondence, we did receive a letter yesterday from Erie County Comptroller Stefan Mahailu regarding COVID guidelines and its impact on public schools. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Are there any other correspondences you wish to discuss? Okay, thank you. We will now conduct our second public expression with the same rules as outlined for our first public expression. Anyone wishing to address the board may electronically raise their hand at this time, and Dr. McCleary will call upon you.
I do not see any hands raised.
I just checked it myself, neither do I, thank you. All right. We will now be going into executive session. May I have a motion, please, to adjourn the regular board meeting and recess into executive session to continue discussion on current litigation and employment matters related to a particular person. Mrs. Beeger, thank you. Sorry, 1 second, I have to close this window and see you guys. And Dr. McCleary, second, thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor to adjourn into executive session? Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, everyone.